At the height of the Cold War in 1975, the Soviet Union permitted Russian Jews to immigrate to the United States. Among these Jewish immigrants was Fima Rabin, an ambitious young man fascinated by the freedoms and opportunities offered by the United States. Rabin, a victim of Stalin's oppressive regime and the brutal persecution of Jews, persevered through the difficult conditions in the United States, and upon immigrating, found a new life in the United States. In the early 1950s, in the Soviet Union, the devastation that had resulted from World War II was still evident. As soldiers returned from the battlefront, they brought with them the horrific consequences of war.
In the early 50s, there were lots of people who were missing arms, legs, sometimes 2 legs, and so there were lots of invalids in the city.
During the war, the Soviet Union's dictator, Joseph Stalin, had sent Jewish civilians and soldiers to Western countries, including the United States, to seek aid. When the war ended, Stalin saw no further purpose for these Soviet Jews. Jews were sent to Siberian concentration camps, known as gulags, where few would survive.
All Jewish newspapers, magazines, publishing houses were closed, and majority of people who were in charge of this organization went to prison.
Among these individuals was Rabin's father, a journalist and officer in World War II.
My dad also, he was like deputy director of the Jewish publishing house. So that's why in 1950 he was arrested. He spent only 5 years because Stalin died in 1953.
Even Jews that had not been sent to gulags suffered at the hands of the Soviet regime.
Well, in Russia, they would say, oh, you know, Jews are as free as any other people, minorities or Russians. But everyone knew that it wasn't true. You know, Jews were not allowed to enter certain professions, like, for instance, they couldn't really become diplomats.
Rabin, his family, and their friends took precautions to avoid encounters with the secret police.
When I was growing up, people knew what to say and how to say it. So all the people wouldn't discuss politics openly. They would usually do it inside their houses or apartments, only with people who are very close to them. In that sense, you wouldn't see KGB in action really unless you broke one of the unwritten rules.
Unlike in the Western world, Soviets were closely monitored by their leaders. They were assigned a profession and did not have the liberty to move from city to city. These laws strictly governed the people.
Russians couldn't one day decide, oh, I want to go to live in Leningrad. You can't, because you need a permit to live there. You know? And it was extremely hard to get it.
Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet government effectively used propaganda to deceive its people. Soviet officials claimed that citizens were given as many rights and privileges as in the Western world.
The Soviet Union was a closed society, so majority of people didn't have access to information that the rest of the free world, had. Russians filtered all the positive information, and 99% of information coming from the West was negative. So majority of Russians had really no idea how people in the West lived.
There were so-called democratic elections, in which every Soviet citizen was given the right to vote.
When you go to vote, there was only one candidate, the one who was chosen by the Communist Party, and you have a right to vote. Not actually a right. It was that right was enforced by the authorities. In other words, you couldn't skip voting. Even my grandma, who was like 85 and she never left her house, she was brought all voting materials right to her bedroom. So it was called voting, but you had only one candidate.
The illusion that Soviet Russia was a sovereign and almighty nation would be tested in the summer of 1959. President Eisenhower sent Vice President Nixon to Moscow to open the American National Exhibit. The exhibit was a cross-section of the average American household, as it displayed all of the latest innovative American labor-saving and recreational devices.
It was a shock to lots of Soviet people because they never imagined that Americans lived in such luxury. In 1959, not many people had gas in their apartments, and they were cooking using kerosene stoves. It's really very primitive way. Lots of Russians didn't have hot water. They were watching Charlie Chaplin movies, like The Kid. That's kind of how we live, even though those movies were in the 30s. Lots of educated people were very surprised to see how American people live.
In the early 1970s, in the final years of the Vietnam War, the Soviet Union looked to expand its foreign trade. However, the United States refused to improve trade relations with the Soviet Union unless it allowed its Jewish citizens to emigrate. In 1975, the USSR consented to the United States' terms, and Soviet Jews were permitted to leave the country.
There were more opportunities for people, and plus, since my family also suffered quite a bit from the Soviet authorities, I decided, I still was a young guy, and it's a good opportunity. The door was opening for Russian Jews, and I decided to leave.
Rabin's family, however, opted not to leave with him.
My brother was older, and he didn't know what he's gonna do really here. You need a certain courage really to leave the place where you're born, and go to some foreign countries where you don't have mastery of language, you don't know culture. So it's you need a certain courage, break all your old life and start new. So
Rabin immigrated to Los Angeles, California.
Wherever Jewish communities were willing to help Russian Jews, that's where you go. So it was only fair. So, I couldn't complain. I went to LA, so it's not such a bad place.
Los Angeles was unlike anything Rabin had previously imagined.
I always thought of lots of Russians, when I was growing up, they thought of America, for them, was New York, and not only New York, like Manhattan, skyscrapers. So I was surprised when I came to LA, where are the skyscrapers? So people were very friendly. Lots of them were curious, asking questions about life in the Soviet Union.
For the first time, Rabin heard Americans' perception of the Soviet Union.
They thought it's a very backward country. It was actually during Stalin years, but later on it improved quite a bit. So.
Rabin's immigration and the exodus of Jews from the Soviet Union revealed people's ability not only to persevere through difficult conditions, but also to adapt to an entirely new society.
Soviet Union, which was a very different country in lots of respects, lots of aspects of life. The majority of people that I knew adjusted rather quickly, and that's very interesting.
Even during the Cold War, Rabin and many Russian Jews alike fulfilled the American dream. These immigrants came to the United States searching for a new life and a new start, and they found it. The United States, a nation of immigrants, ignored its differences with the Soviet Union and welcomed Soviet Jews as if they were Americans themselves.